For our COBT friends, it's Maynard, Mike, and Jeff here with something that is really, truly special. We're going to get to visit today with Dave and Hank True. What you may not be aware of is the True Companies, or True Oil, which is a 75-year-old private energy company based in Casper, Wyoming. It's got 1,000 employees. They do things across 10 states. They're also involved in agriculture, the finance sector, many other things. But I think we've been lucky enough to get to know the Trues, and it's a fascinating story. And they're celebrating their 75th anniversary. They're here in Houston to celebrate with their employees and friends. And it's just such a neat story, and it's so timely, and it's so interesting to talk with unique companies like this that we reached out, and they graciously said that they were happy to join us. So Hank and Dave, thanks so much for joining us, particularly on this special occasion of your 75th anniversary.
Well, thanks for having me.
We're very glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, and I should say by introduction, your father, Dave, was the founder of the company back in 1948, and I was lucky enough to attend your Oklahoma City 75th anniversary party, so I have a feel for how good the story is. We can't wait to jump in and talk a little bit about the history and how you guys see the world today. Well, Mike, what would you tell us about the markets before we jump in and visit with the Trues?
Yeah, Maynard, I'd say markets today on Tuesday, they're pretty much flattish. I mean, crude oil's down a little bit, the market's up a little bit, but, maybe reviewing the last 4 or 5 trading days, what's happened here. And, maybe 3 areas we're going to talk about. The first, we're going to be talking about bonds. The second will be, the crude oil macro. And the third will be, Q3 oil service earnings that are going to be occurring this week. And, start off, I would say that this market right now is remarkably calm for all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East, and that kind of worries a bit. As it relates to bonds, today you had retail sales come out that were really, really hot, and so you had bond yields going from 4.6% to roughly 4.85%. They peaked out, a couple weeks back at 4.88%, and so I think what the market's telling you is that they're concerned at the November 1st meeting with the FOMC. I think betting odds were that the Fed was not going to raise rates. They were going to pause rates. If we get some data between now and then that's a little bit hotter, then basically a rate hike comes back into the fold. So markets, from a bond standpoint, they're concerned with that, and obviously that's driving crude oil markets and equity markets. The second thing we want to talk about is really crude oil markets. We've talked about this for the last couple months. Every week the market's either worried about demand or it's worried about supply. And really this week the market's really focused more so on supply, and supply from like 3 or 4 different areas. First is Cushing levels. Cushing, as we've told you before, is really, really low. I think expectations are going to see another draw this week. I'm going to put it at seasonally and absolute low, so that's a concern. The second thing is SPR levels. And as you know, Biden administration has really taken a lot out of the SPR. When they started their administration, there was roughly 650 million barrels in the SPR, and that's down about 350 million barrels. So almost 300 million barrels they've taken out of it, almost 45 to 50%. So that's a concern, obviously, when war's out there right now, and immediate supplies are concerning. I think the other thing that's come up this week that's concerning people is what's going to be, we saw today announced that, the Biden administration is going to ease sanction on Venezuela, which seems crazy in itself, but that's what they're looking to do. And I just kind of give you some stats. Back when Trump was in office and he put in Venezuelan oil sanctions, that was January 2019. And Venezuela oil production was around 1.2 million barrels a day. And it got to as low as 300,000 barrels a day in September 2020. Today, we're around 800,000 barrels a day. And I think, if everything goes right, maybe they can get a couple 100,000 barrels. So not that significant, but the question is why are they doing this? And so the markets are concerned with that. I think the other thing that the markets are really concerned is what happens to Iranian sanctions. As you all know, Trump put a bunch of sanctions on Iran. In the Biden administration, they haven't reversed the sanctions, but they haven't basically implemented the sanctions. They've allowed these sanctions to go through. And so it's going to kind of give you an idea what the sanctions were under Trump. Under Trump, they first set their first set of sanctions in November 2018. Iranian production was around 3 million barrels a day. The second set of sanctions was in June 2019, and production was roughly 2.3 million barrels a day. The low was September in 2020 at 1.9 million barrels a day. And when the Biden administration took over, Iranian production was around 2.1 million barrels a day. Well, Iranian production is around 3.1 million barrels a day. So up roughly a million barrels since Biden took office. And, just like Venezuela, I think, even if you don't relax Iranian sanctions, that we're not going to get much higher than a couple 100,000 barrels a day from here anyways. Now, if things really break out there and, the Biden administration is forced to, at least, kind of implement these sanctions, I think you can look at, the downside could be 500,000 million barrels a day. And so we'll see how that, so the markets are really concerned with that right now. And so just something to watch out. The last thing I really want to talk about is Q3 earnings start for oil service companies this week. After the close on Wednesday, Liberty Energy is going to be reporting their results. And Friday, before the market opened, Schlumberger is going to be reporting their results. And so I would say, obviously, Liberty is an onshore company, pressure pumping company. So people are going to want to take some direction on what things are, how things are developing on the onshore, particularly on the pricing side. Everyone knows that rig activity is lower, pressure pumping is lower. The question is, what is pricing going to do? And we think pricing is going to hold pretty firm. Obviously, with Schlumberger, it's going to be more about what's going on in the offshore market and the international markets. And what we're going to see is activity levels are going to be higher and pricing is going to be higher. So a lot of the momentum is there. And so that's kind of what's happening this week. So with that, Maynard, we'll hand it back to you.
All right. Well, great, guys. Well, see, there you have it, guys. We always do a little bit of upfront market, but I'm not sure where to start. It's such an interesting story. Dave, Hank, when I was at the Oak City reception, you got up and went through a little bit of the history, and of course the whole family was there. But can we just jump in and talk a little bit about the history of the company, some of the big moments? Your dad, the guy who got all this going. It's such a neat story. We want to share it with our energy-loving audience.
Well, I appreciate that. And you really can't start unless you start at the beginning. And Dad worked as an engineer for the Texas company, which became Texaco, of course. And then as they started moving him around the oil field from northern Colorado to Cody, Wyoming, and then to Casper, and the opportunity for him to step out and be a manager of a very small drilling company came about. And so he left the Texas company and started out as manager of Reserve Drilling Company in 1948.
And he would have been a pretty young guy at this point, 1948.
Well, he was born in 1915, so 33 roughly.
That's pretty entrepreneurial.
At that point in time, he and our mother had 3 kids, pretty young kids at that point. I wasn't even around. And so it was a real leap of faith. He was a real entrepreneur. Along with our mother, eventually she became partner, also very engaged with Dad. He always laughed and referred to his wife as old money bags. And, but they truly were a partnership in the early years and throughout their marriage. And they drug 4 kids into it in spite of their good judgment.
Now, where was Mom from? Where did they meet?
They met in Montana. They were both in Billings and went to what was to become Montana State there in Bozeman. And they'd gone to high school together, and then they got out. Dad got his degree and got a job with the Texas company, and he and Mother got married in...
Well, he was 22 and she was 21, I think.
So 1937.
Yeah. And they moved to the mountains of Colorado. And
it's such a rugged story. It's like this young couple, the 30s and 40s.
As rugged as you want to make it, they moved 2 chicken coops together, and that was their first home. And
That's the home that Dad took his new bride to. It was up in Wilson Creek area of Colorado, up in the mountains. He was a roustabout for the Texas company. Got on his cross-country skis, had a dog that rode the back of the skis with him. Talented dog, obviously. But that's how they made their living. Took his bride to a converted chicken coop, and he was a roustabout.
And then the story, because he obviously had very limited savings. He somehow bootstrapped his way into...
Well, what had happened, Maynard, was that when the owners of Reserve Drilling Company opted to sell out, our father and a gentleman by the name of Doug Brown bought the company and started to expand it and what have you. And they decided that they agreed to disagree, and that actually one of them would set the price of the company, and the other one had the option to either buy or sell, and that they would flip a coin and decide which one was to do which. And Doug Brown was the winner of the choice of what the company was worth, and Dad, along with Mother, had the option to buy or sell. And they, of course, being the entrepreneur that he was, he opted to take over the company, and he and Mother bootstrapped it, as you called it. I can remember them talking about, hawking everything they had to make this thing work, and things got started back in '52, I believe it was.
And at that point, it's just mostly a drilling company?
Yes.
By the time let me go back just a little bit further. When Reserve Drilling, which was Williams and Vickers Valves, a joint venture, Reserve Drilling had one drilling rig. They lost their manager in an automobile accident. So they were scrambling to find someone to replace their manager. And I don't know how they came across Dad or how Dad came across their need, but the Texas company had sort of told Dad, if you want to advance in this company, you really need to get out of this region, get nationwide, get international. And the folks didn't want to leave the Rockies. The Rockies were their home, and they wanted to raise their kids, for which I am most grateful, in the Rockies.
That's a thing to this day. You cannot get, we can't get Rockies people to move to Houston usually.
There's good reason for that. But anyway, so as part of that arrangement, we actually have the original employment contract. As part of that arrangement, Dad could buy up to 5% of Reserve Drilling, which he did. And then Doug Brown, as Hank said, the other co-manager, had the same option, which he exercised also. So after the severe winter of 49, the Williams and Vickers decided they'd had enough of this Northern Rockies drilling industry. They had 2 rigs, I think, by that time, and they offered it to the 2 of them. The 2 of them exercised that opportunity. Literally, Mother and Dad, as Hank referenced, mortgaged everything, including Mother's silverware. So early on,
and our youngest son.
Yeah, which they didn't feel was a risk at all. But so Mother really felt she was an equity partner, even in Reserve. Then when that transaction was complete, they ended up naming it True and Brown Drilling. They operated that way for a while. They used their rigs to drill into some properties. That's what created True and Brown Oil Company. And then, as Hank said, after a couple of years at that, Dan and Doug both had a valid business plan. Nothing wrong with either one of those plans, but they had a different plan. And so then, as Hank said, Doug set the price and the folks decided to buy.
That structure of you set the price and then the other one, it reminds me of, when you were young and mom would say, okay, one of you gets to cut and the other one gets to choose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It was kind of classic.
Just exactly.
What do you suppose a well looked like in the 50s? Like how much to drill it and what kind of production did you get? I know that is going way back, but these wells
going way back, they did a lot of drilling in what was the Glenrock field to start with, which was right there outside of Casper, and they drilled a number of wells out there, and actually got some interest in those wells. And then they moved further up into the Powder River Basin and drilled some wildcat wells up there, a number of them that were not successful. And then they hit a few of them, and the story started to unfold.
But also, when you think about it, like what the industry was like. I mean, this was rugged. We said it before, but also much more dangerous to do than it is today. I mean, this was real man stuff. Not that it isn't still, but I mean, this was really unique time in the
Maynard,
history.
even back when David L. and I were roustabouting or roughnecking and what have you, they used to back trucks up on ramps that were not wide enough to put the trucks on. I mean, they would just barely do that, and they'd move the pumps up on top of the substructures and things like that. It just used to scare the you-know-what out of me, and this was calm to them. I mean, when we did it, so and when we went out, we went out several times with Dad to check out the rigs and see what was going on and what have you. And there were times that he made us stay in the car because of the language that was spoken on the derrick floor. And there are some funny stories like that.
One of the great changes, in my opinion, is even through and into the 70s, the if you will, the gentler sex was not allowed on a rig floor, not even on the location. And I remember when my wife and I, in our early years of marriage, we'd go to a location and she said, I know I've got to stay in the car. And she would. And that has dramatically changed. There still are not a lot of ladies roughnecking, but there are some. And so that's one of the great changes in the industry.
That's really interesting,
in my opinion.
Because that feature of energy, I think people don't realize how dangerous it was and why some of that culture existed. I think they just think men just were excluding women. They didn't realize the environment that you were working in.
And it still is, but especially back then, it was very physically demanding. Very. I mean, they did everything with a 36-inch pipe wrench and did a lot of just manual labor of moving pipe around and that kind of thing. So it's a very different industry.
Spinning chains and things like that were very, very dangerous.
And then, so you guys and your siblings come along and tell us about how Dad's building the business and expanding it, and he starts pulling you guys in? Like, how did that work?
Let me back up just a little bit earlier than that.
Okay.
Dad, this may not be fair, but I think it's accurate. He did expand into other arenas, mostly associated with the oil and gas industry. But most of those decisions were not based on extensive analysis, but rather based on a need of the then current true companies. One of the very first ones is a company called Toolpushers Supply. Dad could not get the bit companies to discount the bits to directly to a drilling contractor. But if there was an intermediary, they'd gladly discount it to a wholesaler.
So if you're using it, you can't have a discount, but if you're selling it to a user, I'll give you a discount.
So he created Toolpushers Supply with that in mind, and then you might talk about the pipelines.
Well, and he had made a fairly significant discovery up in the Donkey Creek area, up out of Moorcroft, and it was quite a ways away from any pipeline company. One of them, which was the Butte Pipeline, had built into the Newcastle area, which was some 36 miles away. And so he and his partners went to the Butte Pipeline and said, please, build a pipeline to us. And they said, no, we're going to truck it. And so they trucked it for a while, and Dad got madder and madder at it as he was successful in drilling, developing these reserves. And so he went to the Wyoming Public Service Commission and got a certificate of authority and announced to the Butte that he was going to build his own pipeline to them and that they would receive his oil. And they said, no, we won't. And he said, yes, you will. And they had a little discussion about that in front of the judge, and the judge agreed with that. And so they built the pipeline, and he took advantage of the reserves that he knew was there. And he actually went back after he got the authority and the smoke had cleared and bought the pipe that Butte had bought to do this for 10 cents on the dollar. And I mean, he truly did a good job of, making it work, but he had all the details and what have you. And the same is true. We got into expanding the pipeline and started moving our own crude oil from different operations to the pipeline via truck. And
right. Going back to the pipeline, as is the case today, back then Dad had a lot of partners. And so it wasn't just Dad and Mother in the pipeline creation. He had a number of partners. They most all of them agreed that yes, we needed to build a pipeline. And so they did, and it was a joint venture with that group of partners. Eventually, Dad and Mother bought them out of Belle Fourche Pipeline. So it didn't start out as a sole family-owned company, but it ended up that way. So
the company, I feel like this was, people think all this supply chain discussion started during COVID. They forget in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of people thinking about supply chain.
Yes, struggling to get the thing done. And he did. When we had a major pump station there at Donkey Creek. And from there, we built out to other independents that had made some significant discoveries throughout the Powder River Basin. And that did start Belle Fourche Pipeline into its own. And as he could, he did, as Dave said, he acquired the other interests that we fondly called We the People. And that was what we referred to as the other owners.
So we start in 48, he buys out his partner in the early 50s, and then he goes from drilling to maybe some upstream, and then he builds a pipeline, and he does the tool pusher thing. Like, what does the company look like by the time you guys were college age or right in there, when you might have been joining, what does the company look like when you got more involved?
Well, and Maynard, I'm sorry, I'm going to take you back.
Take me back
a little bit more.
Take me back just a little further.
It's in my opinion, it's really important to understand mothers and dads' philosophy in raising children. Actually in 1952, it was the year that they bought out Doug Brown. They actually acquired a cabin up at 11,000 feet up in back in the hinterlands. No power, running water was the creek piped into the kitchen sink, and turn on the valve, no heated water. The stove was fueled by wood that Dad chopped.
The facilities were up on the hill.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
With a quarter moon on them.
Yes.
Yep. And then Dad would drive back and forth about 4 hours every weekend. Mother would live up there with 4 young kids all week long. And then after about 5 years, they ended up with a ranch. That's a small ranch, 36 cows, 1 bull. Bull's name was Nugget, scared Mother to death. Anyway, it's a great story. But the whole motivation for the cabin, and I believe for the ranch, was that they did not want their kids to grow up in town during the summer in the golf club environment. They wanted to get them the heck out of Dodge and teach them how to work. They probably failed with that mission, but they worked hard on it. And
I don't know, no power, no hot water, the facilities up the hill.
Well, even later on, as David L. mentioned with the ranches, I mean, we had to go out and irrigate the meadows. We had to dig the ditches. We had to build the fences. And that was just what we did. I never thought of doing anything different.
This is why you interrupted me, Dave, when I said when you guys joined, college. No, you joined when you were like 4.
We were.
Yeah.
And we got on horseback and we rode all day, put a sack lunch in our bag, saddle bag, made sure we had our slicker, even though it doesn't rain a lot in Wyoming. But we were out and gone. The folks waved goodbye, or Mother did in the morning, and she just expected us to show back up. And we did. In spite of what my brothers tried to do, they tried to drown me, drag me to death.
That's not true.
No,
that's
it is
not
a fact.
True.
It is a fact.
That's not true. You just couldn't control your horse.
But it was
two others racing by.
Was it understood that you would one day go up and join the company?
No.
How did that work?
Very important, in my opinion, very important proposition. And I think that both Hank and I and our brother Deemer live the philosophy today. Dad and Mother wanted the opportunity for their children to be involved, but put no pressure on us. I felt no pressure to come back into the family businesses. That was my choice, and at the time, my wife's choice also. I'm still not sure after 50 years if she likes that choice or not, but she tolerates it pretty well. But it was always our choice. And I think, hopefully successfully so, both Hank and I and our respective wives have made that abundantly clear to our children. And fortunately, all 3 of Hank and Karen's are involved with it. 3 of our 4 children are involved. The other one was for a while, and then he and his wife decided to go off and do their own thing. Still in Casper, and we're still family.
And well, let me back up a little bit on what he was
You're going
saying.
to back up on Dave? I mean,
Is that there was very little pressure on us to become any part of the company, but the option was there that if we did want to be part of it, that there would be some type of job available. It might have been building the fence, as we talked about, digging the ditch, but there would be a job available for us to learn about how the companies were put together and how they worked. And so it was more of an option that all three of us, and actually our older sister and her husband, opted to join the businesses at one time or another.
Dad was very clear. As Hank said, he indicated that we would always have a job, but he would never guarantee a
what
position.
kind of job? Yeah.
Right. As Hank said, it could be digging ditch, it could be cleaning the office. We'd always have a job, but we'd never be assured of a position.
So guys, I'm going to jump way ahead on you now just because it's so interesting. Here we are right here talking about your dad and these values and that he and your mom imparted to the kids. How do we, in today's world, 2023, how do we as a society remember these lessons about, people growing up and you don't have to wear a helmet every time you do anything. Like there's a world that you can live in as a kid or even as an adult where you're not, you're just more open and experience things, and you have failures. And like, how do we keep that special sauce that your parents had to create these great people in this great company? How do we keep that in today's world?
I don't know that that's anything that you can write a book about it. I mean, I don't know that Dr. Spock ever wrote a book on how to raise a child. I mean, it's just something that you have to do. And our parents were tremendous role models. They both worked very hard at what they did. And they made good choices. And the idea for us, I think, was that we grow up and have the same values that they had, that they imparted to us, despite, trying to outrace his two older brothers on a horse. I mean, doing silly things. But we've been able to apply those same values, and hopefully that by our applying those and demonstrating those to the next generation, that they will then impart them further down the line as a family.
And I really agree with what Hank just said. Imparting the values and the work ethic and that type of thing is critical. That's how I think society can continue to improve, sustain itself. But I have to also acknowledge that I'm not sure I'd say we're part of the problem, but we're part of the trend. You think back when Hank and I were young, we didn't even have seat belts, let alone car seats, and we spent hours in the back end of a pickup, in a box of a pickup. We did it all the time. And other than him falling on his head a few times, which is obvious, I suppose, but that's how we were raised. We didn't have the helmet mentality. Our kids weren't raised with the helmet mentality, but not 1 mile has been driven with our children when they were young outside of a car seat.
Yeah.
Now, I
I mean, for as
subscribe.
tough as we did pick up some good lessons along the way
I
here.
subscribe to that. I really do. But that is still a shift from the rumble and tumble old days. And I would bet, if you ask our parents, they would say they were much more
Yeah, that's funny.
constrained than their parents were. I mean, as I said, Mother used to wave goodbye in the morning just after daylight and only start worrying if we weren't back in by dark in the middle of the summer.
That's so funny. Yeah, see, they moved you guys to the cabin because they were worried it was too cushy downtown Casper. Like,
Yep.
because people were getting soft.
But we had the advantage of not only doing our job there and doing the chopping the wood, doing whatever it took to do that. We also had the opportunity to grow and see our environment in the best of the world. I mean, we ran those hills, we rode horses all the way through those mountains, and there wasn't a day, I don't think, that we didn't appreciate the ability to be in those mountains in Wyoming.
But that appreciation has grown over the years. When you see more of the outside world, I love going up there. We left the day school got out.
Do you still have that cabin?
Yes, we
Wow.
do.
Does it have power now?
We have a standby generator
Okay.
that we will run with propane in
This
the
is like
evenings.
the Toughen the Children Up Center.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And
That's
we
funny.
take everybody up there and grandkids up there and
So
whatnot.
Western families, family energy, that community. I know over the years we had met the Yates, and there's a number of these families. What would you say about that community? I mean, your dad must have been friends with some of those other entrepreneurial, and there's a number of those companies through the years, and it feels like there's less of them now. But what would you tell us about that world? And
That's one thing Dad had a great feel for, is that he felt the industry had been awfully good to him, and that he owed the industry back for that. So he was very active in trade associations and what have you. And through those associations, he did get to know so many of these people that became part of our lives. I mean, they were invited to come up to the ranch. They were, they hosted them, or we'd go someplace. We had the opportunity to go to some of the meetings, and we got to meet some of these people that you mentioned. And
they're all kind of legendary people in their own right. They're all unique, entrepreneurial,
And they
free
all
spirits.
had a different approach, as you indicated, Maynard. They all had a different approach. It was not a cookie cutter thing. Harvard probably would look at most of them, certainly at our situation, and say, that will never work. That just won't work. And I'm so grateful Dad and Mother decided to keep the family business private. They had multiple, I won't say consistent, but multiple opportunities to either sell out or accept equity investments. And they always said, no, if we can't do this on our own, we don't want to be doing it.
Did they want to give it to the next generation? Was that part of their thinking, or?
They were, it was like employment. If we wanted to work hard on it, they wanted to have the opportunity for us to earn it. But they didn't want to give it to us. We had to buy it, and fair enough, they made it possible where we could, but it was an opportunity. It was not a gift, and they made that very clear. And if we wanted to become a minor owner or a small owner, we had to work in the family business. We couldn't be an absentee owner.
Oh, that's interesting. So you couldn't own a car dealership or do something else. You had to be a part of it.
We had to be a part of the business.
That's quite clever.
We couldn't live in a suite in downtown London or someplace like that.
Well, that's always the problem usually, that, you know, when in the businesses as the generations change.
Well, and one of the ranches, real quickly, one of the ranches that the folks ended up buying in 64, they used that as a real example because it was a legacy ranch north, about 25 miles north of Cheyenne, but family name of Nimmo. And after several generations, they ended up with those who were on the ranch and those who were off of the ranch. So you had the income generators and you had the income takers. Nothing wrong with the income takers. I want to emphasize that. They had an equity position in this ranch, but had no income coming there. And they started putting pressure with the producers saying, we should get a little bit of this. And that went on for a few years. And finally, the decision, reluctantly, from everybody, was the only way to work this is to sell it.
Is to sell.
Yeah, Dave and Hank, I mean, if our viewers come away with anything in this episode, it's that you sort of the adoration, the love, the passion you have for your parents is pretty amazing. And so that's just fantastic to see in this day and age. So thank you for that. The thing you really kind of struck me earlier in your conversations, you said like your dad had a company and he needed something. He just went out, either built it or bought it. When you think about how you guys are running a company, you've got a bunch of different companies right now. Do you see any needs? I mean, if you're looking in the future, what you guys might have to actually build or get or something like that. Has things changed between now and then?
Great, and we're loosely following the same mold. There's one thing that we've got the pipeline, pretty extensive pipeline operations. And so several years ago, the younger generation, fortunately for them, we're out of it, but the younger generation started a company by the name of Flowstate. And it's to help monitor flows in pipelines. So there again, pretty good template that we were working off. Even the third generation we're working off from the folks. We have a need, don't see where there's a good solution out there. Let's go create our own.
Again, we had an opportunity to look back at what was happening. We had a couple of spills that were unfortunate, and during a meeting of sorts, we were told that we needed to do something to show that we really were progressing and looking for these things. And over the years, we had accumulated an amazing amount of data on pressures and flow rates and things like that our engineers had gathered and put in a file. And all of a sudden, the younger generation said, well, we can take that and we can start using what they call artificial intelligence, which I had no idea other than watching Arnold Schwarzenegger. And
that's not the AI that we grew up
no,
with
it's
either
not.
on the ranches.
But so they've utilized this in a most unique way and are doing some amazing technological work now that the new generation, what we call Gen 3, has been able to develop, and it's truly amazing.
Second example, and they haven't stopped just at that. Another example is we've, over the years, of course, just with operations, we've got some real estate gathered up with the ranches and other things. But they've also seen a need for a real estate management arm. And so they've gone out and formed Rick and Bond again left the old guys out of it. But that's just another example of sensing a need, not seeing where it's really fulfilled out there in the market. And they've started it, they've got the right kind of people working with them. Even in Flowstate, we didn't know anything about AI. Fair enough. We've got a great IT department, but they're not great AI experts. So we worked with some other people who knew a lot more than we did, and they were silly enough to come on board with the Gen 3s. And so that template is still working.
One of the things I think about, so you've got, the family's been, so successful. You guys have navigated, moving from generation to generation in terms of who's, day to day driving the business. You also have 1,000 employees. Could you talk a little bit about, attracting employees and retaining employees in the energy business today versus, even just 5 or 10 years ago? I think it was different. And how do you?
I would love to talk about our employees because they are the backbone. They are the people, they're the engineers, they're the geologists that have made us successful. I mean, they're the ones that really have done it. We've been along for the ride. We've been there. But it's been amazing to be able to gather these people around us. And I'm not going to say that they're the brightest or the most qualified, but they are the most loyal and hardest working people you can imagine, from the field level all the way through the management level. And they honestly have been the salt of the earth and the backbone of our companies. And having them there, as we've ebbed and flowed, we've not been real hardcore when the industry turned down and everybody else was laying off. We worked very hard to maintain our employees and the jobs that they had. And you got to say that they see that. And their loyalty to our companies is beyond a belief. It's just tremendous.
One of the things I finally realized, and it took me a long time.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, I know. I'm a slow learner. I really have been all my life. But a family business, especially ours, I'll concentrate on ours, we don't fit well with everybody. I mean, people who really enjoy the high-rise environment, and this is not negative, they enjoy the cubicle approach to things. They're in a position that is very well defined, and nobody's going to penetrate their position, and they don't have the obligation to reach outside. That doesn't fit well with a family business. Family business wants a little bit more entrepreneurship. Sure, we have our bounds, but we fit very well with those type of people, not necessarily the high flyers, the ones that want to be the high rollers, that type of thing. We've had some of those with us over the years, and didn't take them very long to decide that they wanted to go off and do something else. So it's not just two different types of people, but there's a lot of different types of people out there. And whether it's, as you say, we have 1,000, actually it's 1,150 now with the bank operation, the little community bank there in Casper. And we see that in all aspects. It's not just E&P, not just the drilling company, but it's that way with the bank. If they want to be in a small community bank, it fits well. Hilltop fits well with them. On the other hand, if they want to be in a corporate Wells Fargo, sorry, Hilltop doesn't fit for them. So it's a real, it's a natural selection process, quite honestly, for the individual as much as it is for our family.
So in the way you manage the people across all the true companies, if you join, are there people who, well, I did E&P and then I moved to a pipeline and then it came up that I'm good at numbers, so they moved me to the bank. Like how much do people move around in the system?
Not a lot, but it does happen. We've had some areas that haven't been successful, and we've been able to take those people that were engaged in that and put them into different jobs in different areas, doing different things. And they still have the opportunities to prove themselves, to take advantage of various operations. And sometimes there's a real demand for individuals that have proven themselves by others. And it's tough to keep some of these high flyers going that we really are trying to keep a handle on. And while we need to be competitive, we feel that we do offer something, as Dave said, that we are a family business and we're a tight-knit group.
So that I mentioned it up front. So we got 1,150 employees, a number of companies, and then you're in 10 plus states, something like that. So it's a big footprint. How do you manage it? Like what are your tools for communicating with all those people around?
People.
Yes, sir.
It's people.
Oh,
That's how we manage it.
okay.
Honestly, Hank and I, sitting in our little corner office, respective offices, we can't run that ship. We've got to rely on people, their communication skills. And honestly, going back to the loyalty factor, one of the things that was observed with our father and mother was that loyalty ran in two directions. Some people thought Dad was too loyal to some of his employees that had been there for a long time. Maybe weren't carrying quite as much water as they once did. But he was loyal to them. And consequently, those others and others around saw that loyalty and developed loyalty for Dad. So the communications, keeping this outfit sort of going forward, it's the people and the loyalty and their willingness to go that extra mile when it's starting to get dark and cold. They're willing to go the extra mile.
Well, and if I love what you're saying, because you're reminding us all, if you have people that you trust, you don't need a gazillion different systems to monitor people, and because you don't trust them. Like it just allows you to run the business in a whole different way.
That's one thing we do. I think your term is trust. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of that, and we rely on these people, and they rely on us.
So guys, I'm thinking the audience will fuss at us if we don't ask you, because we're always thinking here about what is energy going to look like. It's changing. There's all this conversation around transition and doing things different and all this. It's a whole new world. What are some of your perspectives on how energy's changing, how private companies are going to continue to be great places and competitive and do good things? Like, what's your outlook on today's world?
Maynard, you're not going to like me.
No, I already like it if you say something with a lead in like that.
I'm going to drag back just a little bit. Okay. There's a critical element that we haven't spent enough time on for the true companies and our employees in the future that we see. And that's the next generation.
Yes, Gen 3. That was my next one, I promise.
we are so blessed. I'm blessed to have Hank and Karen's children involved. I think he is blessed to have our children involved. And I know darn good and well, I am really blessed to have our kids involved. And they have the youth energy and drive to take us to the next level. I don't know, but you might have noticed that Hank and I have a little bit of gray hair.
Just a hair,
Just a
smidge.
little bit,
Little
yeah.
smidge.
And some of the hair is missing.
What's that like?
You know, we still want to grow and take the next step. But these young people, they're coming in and they're pushing us. They're pushing the true companies forward in directions that are new to us. Flowstate and brick and bond, those are new concepts to us. And they're taking our current assets and expanding on them also. It's not just that they're outside what we're doing. So I just want to tell you, we've got 6 very engaged next generation, and they're doing all sorts of different things. None of them have the same talent and temperament. They're all different. They're all doing their own things, but we're blessed to have them.
Well, that actually, I'm glad we needed to talk about that, but it's also, it's part of how you think about the future, right? Like you have great people in place and want to take it to the next level. You want to talk a little bit about the 75th anniversary? That's how we, I mentioned it. I got to see it in Oklahoma City. You're now in Houston. What was your thought process behind like, hey, we got to celebrate this. Let's do it in a few cities. Let's take this on the road.
Let me expand on what David L. just got through saying, is that we woke up a year ago and said, oh, well, back in 1948, this happened, and well, that's 75 years. And the next generation said, hey, we want to take that and do something with it. David L. and I and Deemer worked at the 50th anniversary.
Oh,
and
you did?
we did some functions around the country that were well received, and one of them here in Houston. And so we were kind of thinking, well, we did it back then, we can do it. The G3 said, no way.
That
we're
terrified them.
Gen 3 didn't want this. They didn't want you guys running it.
They had a much better way to do it.
Oh yeah, they really did. And they said, hey, it's happened. We've come this far as we've beat the odds of getting 75 years, and we need to celebrate that fact. And it's their celebration of the next 75 years, not this 75. It's the next stuff.
It's not just the group of the 6. It's their spouses. Tad's spouse, Jen, has been very engaged. Our daughter, Ashley's spouse, Jean, has been very engaged. A lot of spousal involvement, as well as a lot of our not only key employees, but also others that have worked throughout the companies. We've got a team working on that, primarily led by the G3s.
Anytime I've mentioned or we've mentioned to our friends that the Trues are going to come by and they're having this 75th anniversary, we've mentioned this. So many people in the energy community say, oh, I love them. I had lunch with a guy today who said I used to play Little League football he was playing against a team that was sponsored by you guys.
Yeah.
But the history and the legacy and the affection that the energy world seems to have for you it's completely understandable. And I just want to make sure that you hear what we hear, because we bump into that quite a lot.
I certainly appreciate that, and I think David L. does also. this industry has been very good to us. And we've met some really, really neat people, not only in the current environment, but previous environments. And I think that just bodes well for our G3s going forward, is that if we can leave good footsteps and good moccasin tracks, that they will follow the same picture.
And they'll take their own version. They'll take their own paths. You know, they don't need our footprints or moccasin prints. They're going to make their own.
I was thinking maybe our 3 kids will be hosting Gen 3 at the 100th anniversary on whatever podcast we have at that point. But
That'd be great.
it's really a delight to visit with you guys. We really appreciate it.
that.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
the opportunity.
well, thank you for including us in the.
Well, it's
anniversary.
always fun to talk about our companies and our families.
Hopefully not too boring.
No, it was
You know.
great. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks to all our friends.